much for joining us on Cab Talk. Now, you arrived in South Africa in the 1990s, a very interesting and important time in South African history.
In 1990, yes.
Yes. On a personal level, what was your very first impression of the city of Johannesburg back then?
Oh, it impressed me, but I thought it was schizophrenic because there was many realities in one territory.
Sure.
I wasn't allowed to live with my husband. So it was like, this really, not just in history book, this is actually true. And it was schizophrenic in the sense that in the days I would go report in Soweto or other townships, and then at night come back in Johannesburg, and you're so close, but at the same time the reality is so far apart. Mm-hmm. So it was challenging for the mind to assimilate that, because coming from French Canada, I mean there's a very, very wide middle class, so it's kind of the schizophrenia you don't really feel it, you know. So it was hard in that sense, but the country as such was fascinating because the people were amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you worked during a very important era, the Mandela era.
Yes.
Now we are in what has become known as the post-Madiba era. What does it mean to you?
Challenges. Another kind of schizophrenia. It's very challenging because South Africa had the chance to have this great man, which was like a chief orchestra, chief of an orchestra. You needed the orchestra to make the music. And the population of South Africa, there's a magic. We call the Madiba magic, but I think there's also the South African magic.
Yes.
And the population, the people of South Africa are extremely warm, welcoming, determined, perseverant. And I think what helped is that when Madiba came out of jail, he set the tone for the absence of vengeance. And a lot of my friends who come from Canada and visit the country said, but you know, there's no vengeance, there's no...
Yes.
In general, that's true. And in general, it's a population that's very conciliatory. But there is this kind of schizophrenia where there's a population and there's now a different ANC, which is less in touch with the people. I feel there's a schism that happened.
Yes.
And the post-Madiba era, I think, is characterized by the challenge of how do we get back to represent the people, because there's like two ANCs. There's the ANC on the ground, the wider ANC, and there's the ANC which is out of touch, the leadership.
Yes.
And how do you put them back together again?
That's very interesting. I think also what's very interesting is what some of the analysts are saying about the post-Madiba era.
Yes.
That now South Africa is like any other country without the Madiba magic, with huge challenges. And you touched on very briefly how the ANC is being received. How different is it to how it was received when the party was emerging out of the ashes of apartheid? Just to paint that picture for us.
Of
how it's being received by the masses now, from what you're reading in the media.
The people are discouraged, eh? And I talk a lot of people. I do a lot of interviews, and there's two ANCs. There's the general one. There's a 90% one which is doing great, and I meet people on the ground, ANC members and the party whatever, and they work hard and they give more than they have, and they're dedicated. And there's a leadership which is completely out of touch with this, and there's an arrogance that has developed. And you say that it's gone like any other country. The democracy, that's true, because the other countries, including mine in Canada, is terrible corruption. And that is worldwide now. And how do you stop that? We just read recently that 85 people of the world own as much as 3.5 billion people. That's a reflection of what's going wrong in our society. And how did it happen to the ANC? That's what we wonder. We thought, no, it was untouchable because it had that Madiba magic. The thing is, it still has the South African magic, the population magic, but the leadership is completely out of touch. And how often and how long are we going to re-elect corrupt people? Re-elect arrogant people that are out of touch? Re-elect people that... Sorry for the language, but don't give a damn. Don't give a shit about it. You know, I look recently at the president of Uruguay, Jose Mujica, who gives 90% of his salary to to the poor, who uses the presidential palace for the refugees or the poor, who lives in his old farmhouse and drives his own Beetle. Now, I'm not saying that to be a good leader, you have to give away your salary. But to be a good leader, you have to set the example and not steal the people's money and not steal the people's faith and steal the people's loyalty. It's hard to vote for another party than the ANC. But one day they're going to wake up and say, they've gone too far. They're taking the population for granted, and they're taking us, as we say in French, as a suitcase. A suitcase, you can put anything inside. When are we going to stand up and stop being taken for suitcases?
Very, very interesting way to put it. Thank you so much for your time. That
Okay.
was excellent.
Thank
Very
you.
nice.